right, we've come pretty far so far this week. Hopefully you have a decent understanding of what we're doing. Now what we're going to do is take this design we just did, and I think we'll make some more sense of this now as we move forward and actually put it to code. Obviously, we looked at the code in a previous video on what ways where we're headed with this, which should help you a little bit understand what we're trying to do when it came to the design piece. So what we did was, once again, after maybe some different iterations and different pieces, we finally finalized our design in regards to how we wanted to write our program. And in doing so, we also created the pseudocode that will go into the main processes of our design, in this case, our procedures. We are missing a few pieces. We don't have the logic in which will go into the main routine, and we don't have the logic that will go into some of the other ones like calculations and so on. These will all be calling routines. If you want to write that logic down in your pseudocode, I guess go ahead. I don't think you need to. I would just deal with the more of the processing logic, okay? And so again, if this is not going to do any processing, all it's going to do is call, and we'll talk about that here in a second. You don't need to put anything in there. Okay, does that make sense? Anyway, kind of hang in there. Let's get all the way through these videos, and hopefully it all comes together for you. With that said, now that I have this, I want to return and start writing my program. Now, this is a program we had already written, okay? Now, there's going to be times where I'm going to ask you to take a program you already written and modularize it. But for the most part, what you're going to be doing is starting programs anew from the beginning. Your first one, I think we're going to have, you'll probably do one that's already been existing, and then we'll start getting into writing programs from scratch. So you need to take what we're teaching here and apply it to your ones from scratch in that case there. All right? So how do we write these things? So let's introduce this a little bit more in regards to a couple of pieces that we need to walk through. Number one, what we're doing here is that we're modularizing our program. Once again, I said that only 1,000 times, correct? And there's pieces here. And what you'll actually see here is that we created what's called user-defined procedures. What do I mean by that? Well, there's two different types of procedures that you can write in Visual Basic. Event procedures. And event procedures are procedures that execute, okay, based upon an event against your GUI. That's what an event is, right? Remember that test? All right. And so an event is something that the user will do against the GUI, and you write a program against it. So in this case, it's button calculate click. There's no other way of really executing that particular procedure other than somebody clicking on that particular control. That's called an event procedure. The other types of procedures you can write in Visual Basic is now called a user-defined procedure. The only way they're executed is if they're called. Okay, so what do I mean by that? So in this case here, call, get, and validate input. Okay, this is what it's going to call. Call, sub, get, and validate input. Okay. This right here is called the signature. This is actually data that we're going to pass. We're going to talk about that in a little bit more detail in the next video. All right, but what we're going to do is follow our particular situation here and say call and get validate input, and this one's going to call these two. All right, so let's kind of look at the flow, not so much the data being passed and what's going on. So in this case here, what I'm doing here is I'm going to call get and validate input, and this is how I write it. Now, let me show you something, how you actually write these things. You have to type this out. It doesn't pop up automatically to you. And so when you decide that you're going to call these things, okay, a couple things are going to happen. Matter of fact, let's do this right here. I'm going to kind of take this out, I think. And I'm going to, here we are, right there. That's what I want to do. I'm going to comment those. As you see, I have this thing called call and get validate input. I wrote this in my main routine in this case. And you may do the same thing. You'll probably just write this out. As you see, a red line popped up. So what do you do when you get a red line? I always joke, do you panic? Do you drop the course? Do you switch your major? No, you hover under it and you actually read it to figure out what it's trying to say. Red lines, as we talked about before, we talked about debugging, means you have a syntax error. That's all it means. Doesn't mean anything more than that. It means you got a little error. Fix it. Well, in this case here, it's saying get invalidate input is not declared. What does that mean? Well, I'm saying call get invalidate input, and I just commented it out, so it doesn't exist. So you're going to get those red lines before, as if you write this like this, okay, you're going to get these red lines prior to you creating them. Once you create the procedure, you'll be fine. So how do you create it? Well, you say private, okay, get underscore validate input, okay? And then when you do that, you'll sit back and you're going to have open paren, close paren, and as you will see, nsub should pop up there for you. There it goes. And now it's actually there. We're still going to have some issues because we don't have everything in there yet, okay? And so as soon as you have all that done, and we actually put all the pieces into it, everything will go away. The underlines will actually go too, okay? And again, we'll talk about those passing data a little bit more. So that's how you create a user-defined procedure. All you do is say private sub, okay, and the name of which you named it here. It must be exact, the exact name. And you want to name it well, okay, meaning give it something exactly what it's doing. Give it some, you don't have to go crazy with it, but give it, instead of saying call procedure 1, tell it what the procedure is going to be doing, okay? Because it allows you to self-document your code just by naming your procedures, your user-defined procedures well. All right? And that is what's called a user-defined procedure, and that's how you do this. Does that make sense? Okay? So that's all I really wanted to cover in this particular video of what a user-defined procedure is. I want you to leave this video understanding a couple things. Number one, how do you, the difference between an event procedure and a user-defined procedure, okay? Again, we'll go a little bit deeper in the next video talking about this data that needs to be passed, okay? Two, we'll get into, I want you to know how to write these things. And basically what you got to do is you determine what you want and then make sure private sub, and then as you'll see in the next one, you got to put all this data in here, and then you basically do unsub, and that's how you write them. It's actually fairly simple once you get going, all right? And then, like I said, what we're going to be doing, and we'll do this in another video also. Let's see, we're going to take those out, and you'll see my red lines go away because I have everything there. And what we'll do in another video is walk through and see how all this kind of comes together and works, okay? So come out of this video understanding what a user-defined procedure is, okay?